Well, I want to welcome everybody to the EPA Region 9 Tribal Virtual Conference in 2020. My name is Aaron Bill. I am employed by the PyramidLake Paiute Tribe as a Water Quality Standards Specialist under the Natural Resources Department in the Water Quality Program. Today we will discuss the Triennial Review process as codified within the so-called Clean Water Act. And based upon prior efforts by the PyramidLake Tribal Water Quality Program from previous triennial review sessions or activities. So first, let's start off with a disclaimer. So I just want to let everybody know that the views expressed herein are not necessarily endorsed or held by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, hereinafter EPA. Nor are the views expressed herein necessarily endorsed or held by the PyramidLake Paiute Tribe, hereinafter PLPT, or by the PLPT Environmental and Natural Resources Departments, or by the Tribal Water Quality Program. Any information given herein are applicable to the PyramidLake Paiute Tribe's Environmental Department Water Quality Program and may be different to other tribal programs. Tribes are encouraged to consult with their regional office, project officer, and with existing rules and regulations before moving forward with their activities. Next slide. Here are the contents of today's presentation. We will proceed first with a brief overview of the PyramidLake Paiute Reservation and about the importance of the ecosystem and what makes the watershed unique. Then we will explore the history of the Tribal Water Quality Program. We will speak about the need for the triennial review process as it is prescribed in the Clean Water Act. Next, we will review the elements of water quality standards. We will then move on to the key components of a triennial review, including identifying stakeholders, the data analysis and review process, and revising water quality standards. Then we will talk about public involvement opportunities, including holding public workshops and then conducting public hearings. We will then speak about the lessons learned through the process and look into what will be explored moving forward in initiating a new triennial review. Finally, we will finish with acknowledgements and take questions from attendees. The reservation is located in the high desert of Western Nevada, 33 miles northeast of the Reno-Sparks metropolitan area. The reservation covers 477,000 acres of surface area, or about 742 square miles. And Pyramid Lake covers 117,000 acres, or about 188 square miles, and is located entirely within the boundaries of the reservation. The Lake Tahoe-PyramidLake watershed, as seen in the green in the graphic there, is connected by the Truckee River, which flows 121 miles from Tahoe to Pyramid Lake. The Truckee River itself is a highly regulated water body that is the largest input into Pyramid Lake, which is a desert terminal lake where water leaves only through evaporation. This fact is crucial to the tribe's environmental management, as we are trying to prevent excessive pollution from remaining behind as evaporation concentrates what's left behind in the water. The reservation contains many perennial and intermittent streams, including 16 of which are monitored by the Water Quality Program annually. The reservation contains springs scattered throughout the reservation, and our wetlands program staff monitors 22 slope, riverine, depressional, and/or geographically isolated wetlands. They also conduct amphibian surveys and bioassessments periodically, as well as manage treatment wetlands which have a marked improvement on nitrogen concentrations of water returning to the river. We also have a aquatic invasive species program, which monitors certain species that have infiltrated other local waterways, as well as developing a boat inspection program. There are approximately 2,288 enrolled members in the tribe with 1,300 residents on the reservation. And Pyramid Lake is home to the threatened Laha'an cutthroat trout and the endangered Kuyui suckerfish, which is endemic to Pyramid Lake, found nowhere else in the world. In fact, Paiute people here take their name from kiwi consumption, although now the fish is not consumed today. Other fish include the tui chub and the Tahoe sucker. The Pyramid Lake Fisheries Hatchery Program began in 1949 to restock fish populations after they declined along with lake water levels due to continuous upstream diversions from the Truckee River to irrigate arid desert farmlands in what is now known as the Newlands Project. Since the tribe took over fisheries responsibilities in 1974, it has worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to maintain a balance of conservation and sport fishing to build a world-renowned fishery. Now we'll go over the history of the water quality program. Water quality monitoring activities began under Pyramid Lake Fisheries in 1981, and the lake monitoring program began in 1986. In the late 1980s, a study by researchers called the Limnological Research Group at the University of California, Davis, was commissioned to determine a reasonably and scientifically sound set of water quality standards, similar to the state of Nevada, but also site-specific to Pyramid Lake. The study served as a major stepping stone to developing tribal environmental policies that exist today, as the tribe obtained a better understanding of the lake's processes to increase its institutional capability to monitor water quality conditions. Once the tribe was able to prove its capabilities to carry out the functions of an effective water quality standards program, the US EPA granted the tribe authority in May 1990 under Section 106 of the Clean Water Act to develop a water quality standards program under treatment as a state granted under Section 518 under the Clean Water Act amendments of 1987. In 1998, monitoring activities were extended to reservation streams and to the lower Truckee River, which is where the reservation boundary begins. In 2001, the Tribal Council approved and adopted the Water Quality Control Plan. Later in 2007, the tribe received treatment as a state authority under Section 303 and gained Section 401 certification by the EPA Region 9 Administrator. In 2008 and later in 2015, the Tribal Council and EPA approved revised water quality standards in the updated Water Quality Control Plan. And presently, we are initiating a new triennial review process, which is still in its infancy stage. For more information about acquiring treatment as a state status, I recommend attending the workshop Clean Water Act, Water Quality Standards, and Treatment Similar to a State Application, which will be held by the EPA next week here in the Region 9 Tribal Virtual Conference on October 20th at 11 a.m. Before we proceed to the triennial review process, we must first review the components of water quality standards. While I can speak on the subject of this slide in depth for an hour, I recommend to consult the Water Quality Standards Handbook, or your regional project officer for more technical support. And once again, I recommend tuning in next week on the 20th for more information. Remember, at a minimum, water quality standards must provide for the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and also for recreation, which are the goals of the Clean Water Act found in Section 101A2. First, the important cultural, community, and recreational uses of water must be identified. For the PyramidLake Paiute tribe, uses identified include, but are not limited to, primary contact for ceremony and recreational uses, cold water habitat, irrigation, and for the protection and propagation of threatened and endangered aquatic life. In my opinion, protecting threatened or endangered aquatic species is the most important function of the PyramidLake Paiute tribe as stewards of the environment. Then, criteria must be established to protect these beneficial uses. Criteria are the water quality characteristics necessary to protect the set of designated uses defined for a water body. There are two types of criteria. Numeric criteria express actual concentrations of chemicals or other measurable parameters of a water body, while narrative criteria are concise declarations, usually expressed as quote unquote free-from statements that express qualitative conditions. Typically, if the criteria for the most sensitive use to be protected are met, then all other uses are protected. And finally, the third component of the water quality standards is the anti-degradation policy, where minimum requirements must conserve, maintain, and protect the beneficial uses of a body by maintaining existing high water quality. To demonstrate the importance of each of these water quality standard components, I like to use the three-legged stool analogy. If one component is weak or a leg falls off, the whole stool fails and falls over. Next slide. So let's discuss the need for a triennial review. The need for a triennial review is codified in the Clean Water Act, Section 303C1, and within the implementing regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations at 40 CFR 131.20, and requires that states and authorized tribes from time to time, but at least once every 3 years, hold public hearings to review applicable water quality standards and, as appropriate, modify and adopt water quality standards. States and tribes may revise their water quality standards, including additions to the 3 elements of water quality standards, which are designated uses, water quality criteria, anti-degradation policies, and other general policies. Over the next several slides, we will explore the key components of the triennial review process. For now, we will review a general flowchart of the process. In the start of the triennial review process, the EPA recommends early coordination with states and tribes upon initiating the triennial review process and before tribes submit the revised water quality standards for review. This helps to gain feedback and proactively identify areas of concern that could lead to a rejection of drafted water quality standards. Section 303C of the Clean Water Act and the implementing regulations at 40 CFR 131.20 require that states and tribes hold public hearings in reviewing and revising water quality standards and to submit those results to the EPA. Informing the public of the need for water quality standards begin in preliminary public workshops, where we first explain the goals of the Clean Water Act, the elements of water quality standards, and the process for revising water quality standards during the triennial review process. Getting public input can alert us in the program to aspects that may not be clear or apparent to us. Stakeholders usually are more in tune to what's happening than those within the general public. Now, in today's climate, it may be difficult to achieve public involvement due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so alternative means must be fully explored. However, this might be difficult due to existing barriers in connecting electronically. Still, the EPA encouraged states and tribes to solicit public input through various means such as webinars and social media. Around the time of holding these preliminary workshops, data review and analysis should begin. Review of water bodies, established uses, water quality criteria, and anti-degradation policies must be explored and compared to field measurements and analytical data to see if existing criteria upholds existing uses. At this time, new or updated EPA recommended criteria should also be reviewed. So after you go through the process of getting preliminary public input and after you review data, you should be ready to draft your revised water quality revisions and revisions to the water quality control plan. Drafts of revised water quality standards and revisions to the water quality control plan should be done in redline version, which demonstrates where changes are made to beneficial uses, criteria, or anti-degradation. Redline edits are conveyed to the public in a clear and concise manner. Further, involving stakeholders through public workshops and hearings builds supports of the communities involved, and public involvement increases the effectiveness of the triennial review process by ensuring that ideas and information are shared. So we hold public workshops where we educate the public on revised water quality standards and solicit comments on the posted water quality standards draft. At this time in 2018, or 2015 rather, upstream stakeholders were engaged in a series of workshops that explained the process of the triennial review, as well as the proposed changes to water quality standards and the scientific justifications for those changes. We also hold a more formal public hearing where public comments are recorded, and while not all suggestions are acted upon, all comments merit a response based upon a scientific or tribal policy basis. Then, the final draft of the revised water quality standards is shaped by public input, and a finalized draft can be released. After drafting the finalized revisions to the water quality standards, the tribal governing authority must formally adopt these by tribal resolution. At this point, I want to remind everybody to keep in mind of the tribal legal processes and procedures for bringing this all the way through the way to the tribal council. One must adhere to established tribal legal procedures as well as those within the EPA. In the PyramidLake Paiute tribe, one must go first before the tribal interdisciplinary team, or tribal ITT, before appearing before the tribal water team. Oops. It is important to keep the tribal governing body in the loop throughout each step in the process, as a well-informed governing body can expedite the process of gaining formal approval and adoption. Upon gaining approval and adoption by tribal resolution, submission of the finalized draft water quality standards must be completed and sent to the EPA within 30 days of resolution. These submissions must include the revisions or additions to water use designations, to water quality criteria, along with scientific justification, or to the anti-degradation policy. Other parts of the submission must include information on the revisions on the basis of scientific and/or tribal policy bases. Also, documentation from the public involvement opportunities must be included in the submission to the EPA. Now, at this point, if you have been coordinating with the EPA this whole time, hopefully these approvals go through pretty quick. However, if the submission to the EPA is rejected, the EPA can promulgate federal water quality standards if the tribe does not submit corrections within 90 days following the date of rejection. Now let's go over another component of the Triennial review process, which is to review your current water quality standards and supporting documents. In reviewing current water quality standards and supporting documents, the water quality program asks certain questions. In reviewing the water quality control plan, we ask, are there new uses to the water bodies that had just become apparent? And are we attaining the water quality that supports the uses of the water bodies? And finally, what has changed since the last publication of the water quality control plan? In reviewing the historic Pyramid Lake limnological study, we ask, what gaps of knowledge have been filled since the publication of a lake study in the 1990s? And are there new techniques and monitoring parameters that we should be aware of? We also considered EPA recommended water quality criteria. There we asked what new standards must be adopted according to new EPA recommended water quality criteria. We also reviewed other historical documents as well as current scientific knowledge in determining if there were knowledge gaps that had since been filled. Another question that was asked was, are there criteria that can be met with cooperation from stakeholders groups? If so, how can we work together to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act? So, in another key component of the Triennial review process, we identified stakeholders. We identify stakeholders according to groups of industry that typically affect environmental management. Typically, stakeholders are more in tune to problems within water management than are members of the general public. In agriculture, we identified the Truckee-Carson Irrigation District, which diverts water from the Truckee River upstream of the reservation boundaries to desert farmlands to the east. The stakeholders within the urban areas of Reno-Sparks and Washoe County are water managers like the Truckee Meadows Water Association, as well as the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility, or TMWRF, which operates under a TMDL permit for nitrogen and total dissolved solids discharges to the Truckee River. The town of Truckee, California was also identified as a stakeholder group, as the town lies on the upper Truckee River as it flows from Nevada to California. You can see the path of the river in the graphic here. It is purple, purplish blue. Also, government entities like the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, the EPA, and the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission were identified as stakeholders, as were tribal government departments on the reservation, along with the three tribal communities of Nixon, Wadsworth, and Sutcliffe, as well as non-government organizations such as the Cattlemen's Association. We, at the Water Quality Program, then identified certain stakeholders that could provide technical assistance, such as the Desert Research Institute, which is an arm of the University of Nevada higher education system and is funded through grants and contracts of basic and applied environmental research. The DRI assisted with data analyses towards revising both the water quality standards and drafting the water quality control plan, complete with scientific rationale. The water quality program also identified Dan Mosley of Native Environmental Services to consult and to provide technical assistance due to his extensive knowledge and experience with founding the Tribal Water Quality Program when he was previously employed with the Environmental Department. As an aside, I encourage attendees to attend Dan's presentation on the recent whiting event on Pyramid Lake this past summer. He will be speaking on the 21st. The tribe also sought technical assistance from its EPA Region 9 project officer at the time, and from the Water Division, as well as the state of Nevada's Division of Environmental Protection and the Water Pollution Control Office. Another important component of the Triennial review process is the data analysis and review. Having multiple data sources ensures that a more complete analysis can be done. Our tribal water quality program utilizes YSI XO 1 and 3 sondes to record field measurements. The sondes have multi-parameter sensors that can monitor temperature, salinity, pH, turbidity, specific conductance, total dissolved solids, and dissolved oxygen content. We also have 2 continuous monitoring stations that record field measurements every 30 minutes on the Truckee River. We conduct monthly sampling activities on 10 spots along the Truckee River and run tests for nutrient quantification on orthophosphate, total phosphate, ammonia, inorganic nitrogen, and total kaldol nitrogen. Things to consider when doing data analysis and review. We have to consider what gaps of data exist within our data gathering methods. So we also consider external sources like the United States Geological Survey, the Desert Research Institute, and the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection to fill those gaps of data. An example of this is with our monthly sampling activities. Usually we gather early in the morning and head out early to sample due to the amount of time it takes to sample, and then travel back and forth to process those samples in the laboratory. Therefore, our field measurements usually occur early in the day, which skews the data away from maximum temperature readings, which affect dissolved oxygen content depending on the time of day. So we consider US Geological Survey data sets to fill those gaps, along with, albeit with limited parameters data sets. We also must consider other studies that influence data analysis, and these may vary on a site-specific basis. There was the Limnotech report, which was commissioned by our upstream partners, that examined the effects of phosphorus and nitrogen influences on dissolved oxygen content. However, their estimation of what constitutes low flows affected our data when reviewing which data are exempt during extremely low flow events. So we have to consider the complexity of the Truckee River and its management, for it is a dynamic water body which forces us to change the perspective through which we view our data. In our data analysis and review, we must consider which data is exempt due to low flows, so we use this flowchart scheme shown here. Since upstream managers were using these modeling methods within the Limitech report, and it was vetted by multiple third parties and the EPA, we utilized their methods, but found the associated flow values in determining 10 percentile flows was skewed towards extremely low flows. Low flow is defined as, quote, the flow of water in a stream during prolonged dry weather, unquote. However, conditions like this are the norm in the high desert, and ordinary flows were considered low flows by their metric. So it is important to ask, how is the data being reviewed? And are there other methods or perspectives to view the data differently? What other methods exist to determine what constitutes 10 percentile low flows? At the end of the data analysis and review, we were ready to publish the revised standards and proceed to the next steps in the process. At the end of the Triennial review session in 2015, the following revisions and additions were drafted to the Water Quality Control Plan, including ammonia, where the proposed change was to adopt the 2013 EPA ammonia ambient water quality criteria for freshwater aquatic life. And the justification given and accepted by the EPA was based upon its own scientific recommendation. Another proposed change was to the numeric water quality anti-degradation standard for clarity at an annual average of equal or less than 0.025 per meter. And the justification for that was based upon our anti-degradation policy within the Water Quality Control Plan and based upon analysis of historic Pyramid Lake KPAR readings as well as SICI desk readings. Another proposed change to the Water Quality Control Plan was the adoption of a more stringent standard on dissolved reactive phosphorus or orthophosphate, in which we moved from greater or equal to 50 micrograms per liter to a more stringent value of 22 micrograms per liter on an annual average basis. The justification given to and accepted by the EPA was that it was the state of Nevada equivalent. The difference being with us in a state is that we adopted only the DRP criteria. We did not put into effect the total phosphorus criteria, as DRP is what's biologically available. Finally, another proposed change was the acceptance and adoption of the fecal bacteria E. coli 2002 recreational water quality criteria, and the justification given and accepted by the EPA was based upon its own scientific recommendation. Now, let's talk about another important component of the triennial review process, which is giving opportunities for public involvement. The following slides summarize the efforts by the Tribal Water Quality Program to involve the public, who typically are not particularly interested in the overall process. We held introductory meetings to inform the public on the basics of water quality standards, of the triennial review process, and the subsequent outreach process. Following drafting of the revised standards, we held additional public workshops where we explained the triennial review process and the reasons for the revised standards along with justification. We took the time to involve as many stakeholder groups as possible, even holding meetings off reservation in the towns of Fernley and Reno Sparks, as well as holding one out of state in Truckee, California. The public comment period lasted from May 26th through August 21st, 2015, where only proposed changes were up for comment, and responses to those comments were included within the public record that was submitted to the EPA. For proposed changes, a final public hearing, which was well advertised through local newspapers, was held for the public in a more formal setting, where a stenographer was hired to document public comment. These public comments were included along with the water quality program responses in the documentation sent to the EPA for final approval. The PyramidLake Paiute Tribal Council approved the revised standards in September 2015 through tribal resolution. All materials used in the Triennial review process, such as presentation materials, the minutes from all public meetings, hearings, and workshops, and public comments and responses were submitted along with the revised water quality standards in the revised water quality control plan, along with the resolution for approval and adoption by the Tribal Council. The EPA then granted final approval later in 2015. Now we'll talk about lessons learned from the process. There were many, although there are only 4 listed here. One of them was that we learned that water quality standards don't need to be revised all at once. In conducting your review in data analysis, you want to look at what uses are most affected by what would be considered exceedances to the criteria. You have to ask yourself what has changed and what's new with designated uses, water quality criteria, and anti-degradation. And we found that it's best to review these standards gradually over time. Things change, although they don't change as quick as you think. We looked at our data and we realized that we did in fact need to have changes needed in our sampling activities. As we said before, we are kind of limited based upon time constraints with the time of day that we do sampling. So not only was it a change in sampling, but we also found that we need to consult external data to fill in those gaps. And finally, we saw that going through the process of the Triennial review, including stakeholder groups in the towns of Reno Sparks, as well as Truckee, California, consulting with members of the state Division of Environmental Protection, that going through these processes, that we actually strengthen the working relationships that we've had with the state of Nevada. For the longest time, the tribe has been involved with a lot of litigation in which we had to prove to outside entities that water that was being released through the Truckee River was not being wasted. And it took several years of working with people within the state to finally develop what I feel is a beneficial and copacetic cohesion of environmental management. Now we'll talk about Lessons learned moving forward. Um, so we realized since the publication of the last water quality control plan that in fact a lot has changed to both upstream or off reservation activities as well as within tribal environmental management. And those changes of activities mandate environmental review of those activities' impacts. So an example that I like to give is that within the past couple of years, the Tribal Council has now allowed fireworks to be discharged at designated beaches on the west shore of Pyramid Lake. And in fact, it is the only place to legally discharge fireworks within the whole of northern Nevada. And along with fireworks discharge comes concerns that the heavy metals that are found within them and other chemicals will in fact make their way into the lake. So a lot is not really known about that. So within the future, we are going to have to conduct analysis using induced coupled plasma mass spectrometry, as well as flame atomic absorption spectroscopy to fully enumerate those levels. Other things that have changed is that there has been near uninhibited industrial growth along the Truckee River. And I'll demonstrate this to you in this next slide. Now this picture is in an area east of Reno. It is about halfway from Reno Sparks to the southern external boundary of the reservation. And in the past few years, there have been several industrial firms that have bought up space. And there's a few big names like Apple. Apple owns a server farm where they divert water to cool their um, computer servers. Tesla has moved in and they are manufacturing lithium batteries uh, um, for their vehicles. And the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center is basically a collection of companies that are conducting manufacturing activities. So recent concerns of trace heavy metals also pertain to the new industrial center that was built after the last water quality control plan. The Tahoe Reno Industrial Center is located between Reno Sparks and upstream of the southern boundary of the reservation. Due to an overemphasis of economic benefit, the process for approving construction activities was streamlined and expedited, and that raised questions and concerns about the environmental impacts of the industrial area, and whatever environmental data that exists is kept secret. In fact, the rate of construction was so quick that any type of reasonable environmental review just did not happen. Furthermore, the construction of a large-scale industrial center also exacerbated the growth of the metropolitan area of Reno Sparks, which caused a housing crisis due to a massive influx of an imported workforce. So the housing crisis created an environment in which political pressure on local politicians caused them to push through housing projects where ordinarily pre-existing concerns of building within the floodplain historically prevented such residential projects. As demand for housing grows and the remaining floodplains get smaller, more emphasis will be focused upon moving larger quantities of floodwater downriver faster, thus negatively affecting the residents downstream and harming the Truckee River ecosystem. Another concern moving forward is the effect that the COVID-19 pandemic will have on the triennial review process and the prescribed public involvement process. Gatherings of large groups of people are not allowed still on the reservation, and the accessibility to connect electronically is not consistent up across the three major tribal communities. Finally, the water quality program here at the tribe is aware that certain aspects of the watershed are still unknown. There are always emerging constituents of concern, which we do not have all the information needed to determine their full impact on the ecosystem. Aspects like pharmaceutical compounds dissolved in the water table or microplastic contamination in the aquatic food chain are still not totally understood yet. So the tribe is exploring ways to fund studies that will further inform us on those impacts. Also, we have been working with researchers, grad students from the University of Nevada, Reno, and their studies have also helped shed some light on the still unknown aspects of the watershed. Okay, let's close with acknowledgements. I would like to thank the United States Environmental Protection Agency and Region 9 for funding Pyramid Lake Paiute tribal environmental activities and providing us with technical support when we need it. I want to thank Vanessa Martinez and others at the San Pasqual Tribe for organization of the EPA Region 9 Tribal Virtual Conference and for hosting Zoom training. And I want to thank Kelly Williams at the EPA Region 9 Office Tribal Water Section for moderating this presentation. I would also like to thank members of our Tribal Water Quality Program staff, Cameron Morgan, our manager, Robin Mercer and Jeremiah Sampson. They are our wetlands program team. They do a good job. Patrick and Kaylee provide support with sampling and helping us with laboratory activities for quantifying nutrients. And at this point, we'll wrap up. We'll take questions from attendees. If you have any more questions about our particular program here at Pyramid Lake, please send me an email at abill@plpt.nsn.us. And with that, I'll send it over to Kelly for questions.
Thanks. Great job, Aaron.
Thank you.
There's been a few questions that have come in. You have about 10 minutes left. So I'll read them out to you. The first one is from Sarah Ryan. She asks, how did you develop the criteria and water quality objectives for tribal beneficial uses?
Okay, so in our history of our water quality program, I mentioned a study that was done by researchers at the University of California, Davis. It was a study that took about 5 years, where pretty much they looked over all aspects of the Pyramid Lake ecosystem, from nutrient quantification to phytoplankton analysis. They did studies on the nitrogen cycle. They did studies pertaining to the two fish that I spoke about, the law and cutthroat trout and the QUE fish, which are on the bottom left of the slides. So they really helped us take what the state of Nevada had done, but they also applied site-specific criteria based upon their findings. Did I answer your question fully?
Can I possibly do a follow-up?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. This is Sarah Ryan over at Big Valley. You know, we're working on developing beneficial, or the criteria for beneficial uses, tribal beneficial uses over here in at Big Valley. And you know, did you guys end up doing some surveys with your members about exposure rates? And you're just trying to understand the best way to get the exposure scenarios information so that it can be, you know, calculated what that actual range is, because that's what we're assuming the state is gonna, or the region is gonna need for, you know, having it be part of their basin plan. So it's not water quality standards, but basically the same thing.
I don't actually have an answer for that. I do know that with the researchers that came in, they pretty much did a comprehensive analysis. They even did non-point source studies. They looked at the river input. As for your question, I don't think I have a complete answer for you. I apologize for that.
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
It looks like Levi might have their hand raised. Do you want to unmute your mic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Aaron. I work for the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians in Southern California, and we're currently on our triennial review process. And there's been some questions about satisfying the public participation requirement as you go through the triennial review. And I was wondering if you plan on conducting any of those public hearings through the Zoom format or any virtual format, and if you have any established procedures of how to, you know, spread the word on that, and if you have anything to share as far as that's concerned.
We don't necessarily have anything established procedure-wise. We have been doing public outreach, typically through the tribal Facebook page and social media. For us, we are somewhat isolated from the grid, so to speak, in that not everybody has access electronically, and we're finding that that's creating kind of a burden with regards to the public involvement requirements. We have been told that due to other acts that, you know, we can't conduct paper surveys. So we are going to have to do this electronically. So we're looking into ways of getting the word out to people. So I think Zoom is a great platform, but unfortunately, like I said, we just can't reach everybody that way. Especially, I'm doing outreach right now for our non-point source assessment report and management plan, and a lot of the stakeholders that we would have to target, they're just not technologically savvy, and to get people together outside of electronic means, I think is almost difficult. Is absurdly difficult and almost impossible in today's COVID-19 pandemic. So it sounds like you guys would have a better, you know, a better chance of reaching people electronically. I would urge you to use all the social media platforms to get everybody. Unfortunately, not everybody has a Facebook account, so.
Yeah, right now we're just considering, you know, when our first public hearing, what we did is we posted a ad in the newspaper, and I think what we'll do is we'll do the same thing, but instead just kind of let them know that there's this Zoom format is that we're going forward with, and, you know, more information, and please see this website, or try to establish that that area where they can get that information related to the meeting, and then, like you say, utilize the other social media formats to get the word out. It's just, you know, it's a difficult situation, and you have to get creative, I suppose.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think to go along with that is that you have to provide people incentive to participate, because we noticed in the last Triennial review session is that for a lot of these in-person workshops is, you know, we just didn't have more than 1 or 2 people that showed up. So a big portion of that is to get people actually invested towards, you know, environmental management. And it seems like people only become involved only after they get negatively affected by environmental management practices. So I find, you know, you have to sell people on the fact that, you know, you have to own this and you have to be involved. So that
Absolutely.
could be a strategy that you might want to employ. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my questions.
So thank you guys for asking. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
I haven't seen any new questions come in. Pat says great presentation. Vanessa says great job. A few more great presentations.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate you taking your time to take in the presentation. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, we only have about 4 minutes left, so we can end a bit early. Great job, Erin.
Thank you, Kelly, for moderating the question and answer session. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, thank you, Erin. If anyone has no more questions, I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting early. Again, thank you guys for joining this session. We really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. The conference will resume next Tuesday, but on Monday, we also have the Tribal Leaders Roundtable on the 19th. So there's more information on the website if you guys would like some more information. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Desiree. Have a good day.
You too, thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.